class.
Yeah.
That all spiraled from a simple like accommodation request.
Like a very simple one too. Not even like trying to overhaul anything
I
or
was like, I'm not trying to get a free pass on anything. I just want you to like, because I've mentioned it to them and they're like, you know, proof or it's a no go.
Wow.
wow.
I'm
I'm
so
so
sad.
sorry.
And that's kind of the thing that students face where everyone reads them a kind of a disability clause at the beginning of the semester that's in the syllabus.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's kind of worst case scenario of what can happen when you disclose a disability in
Yeah.
the classroom, but it happens. And so that fear of being um, like attacked for
Mm-hmm.
disclosing a disability or, you know, treated poorly or just, it, you know, written off as a nobody who is not worth anything because you disclose that you have a disability both in workplaces and in school is
Right.
really
Mm-hmm.
like intense. And so there's so much shame and students who are like, I don't want to disclose it, so I'm just going to do my best to pretend I don't have anything wrong with me. And it's not something that's wrong with them, it's just something that it's a something you
Right.
you know, have to work around. It's
Mm-hmm.
you know, there are pathways and we should be accommodating this, but a lot of times we just shame people for asking for help,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's really unfortunate. and and kind of to segue that into sexuality, um I'm good at that, like making that turn. um it's the same way, like the way that people get mad at disabled people for parking in spots, and some people even get mad that there are handicap parking spots.
That
um
doesn't make any sense to me. Um,
um
that's why I
I
laughed. Probably
I
inappropriate.
doesn't make any sense to me either. I'm like, you're just angry for no reason. You just mad to be mad.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, maybe you just need to go work on yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Take a time out.
Like people have gotten mad just that I say I'm disabled, and people don't think that disabled people are like legitimately human beings with all the wants, needs, fears,
Mm.
urges
Yeah.
as anyone else.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh well, you can't be in college, you're not a whole person.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, oh, good for you for trying to better yourself. It's
Ew, what a gross thing to say to somebody.
yeah, there's a lot of really gross things that get said. It's a lot of infantilization, I think.
Yeah, and I think like my sort of take on the idea of that sex and disability need to be talked about as not separate things, but as one thing, is that very much that infantilization that happens. And I think that the two topics go together also because it's they're two topics that make people intensely uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
Talking about disability, talking about sexuality, people get really uncomfortable and shut down and don't know what to do. So they just don't talk about either subject, much less putting those two subjects together. It's just like no go. And because we don't have any kind of acceptance culturally of this being something acceptable to talk about, we don't talk about it. And it's just this big, dark, scary hole in the conversation.
Yep. Like people, I mean, when you disclose to someone that like, oh, my mom has cancer, people are all like, uh, uh, like we don't know what to say to that. Imagine saying like, I have cancer. And people are just like, oh, yeah, my grandma had that one. And then they're just like, let me know if you need anything, and you like never see them again. Because it makes people very uncomfortable to consider that, like, they don't want to step on anything like uncomfortable. They don't want to say anything wrong, but they also don't know what to say,
Right.
because they've never heard anyone talk about it.
Yeah. I think a large part of this issue, especially that I've noticed here, like in Montana, is that there's like this pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality here.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're looking at a society that believes that there's only one way to be productive, and no other way is acceptable, we're looking at like this capitalist, colonial view of other types of productivity that other people can bring to the table. And that's dangerous when you're trying to uphold like these like capitalist, colonial, white supremacist like rules, like gatekeeping rules to society.
I mean, personally, one of my favorites is that, you know, a lot of people believe that a woman is only legitimate, like like women's purpose is to be a vessel for children. And
Right.
I have heard this messaging so much in my life that, like, well, if you don't want children, or if you don't have children, what is your purpose on earth?
Right.
Right.
And I'm like, hi, thanks. I am, like, because of my genetic condition, unable to have children.
Right.
So are you saying that my existence is pointless? Okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah, like a right and wrong way even to be a like gendered person. Like,
I mean, the discussion during COVID especially has been very, very damaging, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard, like, well, disabled people are just a drain on society. Yeah, that narrative is especially strong here in Montana.
yeah.
If you ever read the comments on a Missoulian article, I recommend it.
If you ever look at the priorities that our state legislators who are working in, you know, appropriations, where they put their money, that's deeply rooted in Montana, like, thought processes.
Oh yeah, the idea, like, so many places are cutting Medicaid benefits.
Yeah. Yep.
And so many people think that, like, all social welfare programs go to is like people who are worthless and on drugs and yada yada yada. I get Medicaid because a majority of my income goes to medical expenses. Yeah. But I am, well, technically I'm on drugs, but none of them are really recreational.
Unfortunately.
Because I have brain issues, and I tend to stay away from things that are at all mind altering, because I've had plenty of visual hallucinations without my consent in my life from seizures.
Not nearly as much fun.
They don't seem like a fun trip for me.
Right.
Yeah, like that's not something I want to do on a weekend away at the gorge.
Yeah.
like no. I'm gonna pass. I'm gonna pass on that. But also, like, I'm a productive member of society, I like to think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do things that are for the general good of the public. I volunteer a lot, but I feel like I shouldn't have to excuse my existence either.
I feel like a lot of cultural attitudes around people with disabilities generally come from this idea that, like, in order to accommodate anyone, we have to do extra work, and we don't want to do extra work. So we're going to be whiny and bitchy and mean about it, and we're going to try to devalue people who want to do things because it's easier for us if they just stay away. And so we've developed all of these systems to make that easier for more able-bodied people, like making it harder to get parking if you're disabled, making it so that if you are on disability, you can't make more than a certain amount of money so that you can't actually participate in so many things. Or
do you know how many disabled people have to get, like, or if people become disabled, they have to get divorced because their income is, as a couple, is too much to be on disability.
Yeah.
So they either can't get married or they have to get divorced and live separately in order to remain on disability. It's
it's
like
disgusting.
Really, unfortunately, common trend.
Yeah.
Which
I've heard a lot about that lately, and it definitely is. It's like, if you want this measly reward that we will dangle in front of you, you must basically remove yourself from being, you know, a quote productive member of society, because you can't try to work a full-time job and be on disability. So it's like, well, we don't want you to get in our way, so we'll just shunt you off to the side so that we don't have to work too hard at letting you be a part of society.
And I've actually lost a job because their insurance company rejected me.
Wow.
What?
Pre-Affordable Care Act, when insurance companies could reject you for pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lost out on a job that I'd gotten the job, but their insurance company rejected me. And the company was like, we can't provide you insurance.
I used to be so afraid of that happening that when I would go on a job interview, I would just right up front be like, you should know I have a health condition. So if you want to put me on your insurance, it might be expensive and that might be a liability for you. And the people doing the interviews would always be like, oh, no, don't tell me this. Like, this is not stuff that I'm supposed to know. And I'm like, I just don't want you to be mad at me later if you hire me and this becomes an issue for you. Like, I just want to put it out there. It's like you have to walk this incredibly fine line to succeed if you're a person with any kind of health condition, let alone a health condition that causes a disability. And I think, like, what the kind of general direction I was going in with that is that in the world of sexuality, especially when it comes to like sex education, anything involving the exchange of money for sexual services or education or anything like that, I feel like there's a similar feeling of, well, sure, it would be nice if we could accommodate folks with disabilities, but that's more work for us to consider people with different needs.
We've been asking for video conferencing, working from home. You know, a lot of people have this issue. And before the pandemic, we were like struggling, trying to get, you know, this more accessibility to that kind of thing and more accessibility to like virtual classes, and being refused, like, oh, we can't do that. We don't have the technology to do that. And boom, global pandemic. As soon as it affected all the ableds,
right?
We had that technology like the next day.
Yeah,
right.
And it was like that. And like now, half the classes I'm in are both taught online and in class, and it's the same kind of education that we were getting before. They could have made those accommodations years ago.
I can tell you that I was making those accommodations years ago. I had a student in a Spanish class that I was teaching at a community college who had a recurrent cancer and had to go back into chemotherapy at a far away, like a distance. He was in Lawrence, Kansas, and I was in Iowa. And so it was 4 or 5 hours away. And so she was staying there and just basically living in the chemo ward because it was cheaper than getting housing nearby for a twice weekly infusion. So I just had her Skype in. And I set up my computer like she was one of the students in the classroom and did my lecture. And then when they had to do like speaking to each other interactive, she just turned the laptop and she talked to the person she was next to. And that was in, I want to say like 2013 or 14. And her advisor, everyone else was telling her she had to drop out of school.
Wow.
Yeah, they tried to tell me that when I had one of my kids, that and he was young, that I should just drop out for the semester and
Yeah.
tend to my
And I
child.
told her, I'm like, there's no